We were discussing first chapter, the geography. So what is the name of first chapter?
Sir, you have been mute.
Then turn on your audio, sir.
Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. Good morning, everybody. And we were discussing
Good morning,
first chapter. What is the name of first chapter?
Good morning, sir.
So the name of first chapter is about resource and development. And we discussed about the concept of resource, is it not? And about the classification of resource in the last class we discussed. So resource, first classification what we discussed in the last class about what is that? The classification of resource. The first one, which is based on origin. So resources are classified under many bases. First one is about the origin. So resource and development. So about the resource concept we discussed, and I have given the definition term for this, and you have to buy at that. You should not make any modification in that. You should not create your own definition for that. Whatever the definition I given for these resources, you must buy it and you must read that. And they have to write as like their book or as I given. So about this resource, the classification we started to discuss about the classification. The first one, the classification which is based on the origin. The resources are being classified under the origin. So there are two sub-concepts under that. What are those? Biotic resource and abiotic resource. Then the second classification is about based on the renewability. Based on renewability, we have two more classifications. What are those? Renewable resources, non-renewable resources. You may say it is based on renewability or based on the exhaustibility. Anything. You can say it is based on renewability, otherwise based on exhaustibility. So based on exhaustibility, we have two. One is renewable resources and non-renewable resources. Then about the ownership we discuss. Ownership, we have four. Further, we have four classifications based on the ownership. One is individual resources, another one is community resources, national resource, and international resources. So that the fourth one, when we discuss, it's about based on like a level of distribution and use or status of development. Sorry, the status of development. We discuss about the status of development. So there are four. One is potential resources, developed resource, reserve and stock. Potential, developed, reserve and stock. That's about all the four classifications we discuss. Now we go for the next concept in that. So it's about the development. In this chapter what we started to discuss is about the development we started to discuss. There and we explain and we discuss about the one question. So that is, what are the problem we are facing because of indiscriminate use of resources by the people? What are those problems? I told you to remember the 3 points. Have you all remembered? That's good. So it's a question. Definitely you get a question based on this about the indiscriminate use of resources. Because of this indiscriminate use of resources, we are facing three important problems. It's about depletion of resources in satisfying the greed of few individuals. It's a one major point. It's not. It's of course we are getting depletion of resources in satisfying the greediness of few individuals. Then another accumulation of resources in few hands. Accumulation, gathering the resources in their hand, collecting all the resources in their hand. It's accumulation of resources in few hands that creates the social division, those social discriminations like rich and poor. That's what we discuss. Then third important point what we discuss is about the indiscriminate exploitation of resources, and it has led for many problems. Is not? It has led for the global ecological crisis. What are those? It may be the ozone layer depletion and the environmental damages, so erosions, soil erosions. So these of the problems we are facing because of this indiscriminate exploitation of our resources. That's what we discussed, and about some more points we discussed based on the related to all those things. Now the question is that we are using these resources abundantly, even though it is not equally distributed over the earth's surface. So that reason it is leading towards a problem. So how can we solve this problem? How can we overcome from this problem? We cannot run with this of all the problems. We cannot go with all these problems. If it is so, and we will be seeing the end of earth very sooner. It's going to end. The whole life and whole earth is going to end in a few years or few coming thousands of years. It may get ended if you are going with the same problems what we are facing because of these indiscriminate uses. For that, every problem will be having its own solutions. So what are those solutions? When it's a problem, there is a main problem we are facing because of indiscriminate uses of resources or indiscriminate exploitation. And what are the some solutions we can have for them? So it's about sustainable economic development. So now the continuation, the next concept is about sustainable economic development. We should have this sustainable economic development to overcome from this problem. To solve this all the problem, we should have sustainable economic problem. The greediness of the people is increasing. Janagala durasa increase ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. Now every people are in need of every resources. Because technology got improved and we are in the peak of modernization and the civilization. Every people got modern civilization now. Every people are got into the modern civilization. So that is the reason we require the more resources to adjust with this modernity. For that, the resources should be available for everybody equally, but we are not having equal distribution of resources. It's the main problem. Our understanding, like suppose here, actually now we are in the peak of civilization. Every people, we got a modern civilization. Civilization is lifestyle of a people. It's not. So the lifestyle of people, it is adjusted. Now it's getting adjusted to this modernity. So for that, if you want to run along with this modernity, we need to get more resources, because every people are getting know the use of resources. Is it not? And we are getting use, and we are satisfying our needs by making use of resources. That means every people are required in every resources. But the resources are not equally distributed over the earth's surface. It's not equally distributed. Then how can we make these resources to available everybody? How can we provide the resources equally to everybody? How can we make resources to be available to everybody? It's not. It's a problem. To solve this other problem, we have sustainable economic development. It's another one scheme, program, or it's an act. It's a plan. So sustainable economic development. You should have this sustainable economic development to solve all this problem and to provide equal availability of resources to every people. To provide equal availability of resources to every people, we should have sustainable economic development. So what is this sustainable economic development? Sustainable economic development is nothing but development or making development in the resources without damaging the environment. Making development in the resources without damaging the environment and without compromising with future generation need. Have you understood? Sustainable economic development is nothing but making development developing the resources without damaging the present environment. Developing the resources without damaging the present environment and without compromising with the future generation need. It's called as sustainable economic development. Developing the resources or making development in resources without damaging present environment and without compromising future generation need. It's sustainable economic development. That means making development in the resources, whatever the resources we are having in the environment, making development in that and without damaging the present environment. Suppose we are making development in the water. Water is very much required essential resources at present and from many years back, is not. So here, and it's been a very much required resources, the water. Now, making development in the water resources, making development in that should not damage the environment. Instead of without we can use should not damage in the present environment. The development should not damage the present environment. Suppose if you are constructing the dam or any other things, barracks or the dam. Suppose you are constructing anything that should not damage the present environment. That should not damage. Then this development. So why we make this development in the resources? To make use of the resources efficiently. Is it not? ಯಾಕೆ ನಾವು ರೀತಿ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಈ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಯಾಕೆ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ? ಆ ಒಂದು ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ನ ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾಗಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಸಪೋಸ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಅ ಮಿನರಲ್ ಆಯಿಲ್, ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಡ್ ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್. ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲಿಯಂ ಅದು ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಆಗಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ದ ಪೊಟೆನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್. ದಟ್ ಮೀನ್ಸ್ ಇಟ್ ವಾಸ್ ಅ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್. ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲಿಯಂ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲಿಯಂ ಅವೈಲಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿತ್ತು, ಆದರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸೋ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ವಿ ಡಿಡ್ಂಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ದ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ಟು ಮೇಕ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್, ದ ಪೆಟ್ರೋಲಿಯಂ. Is it not? So now the petroleum resource is developed because we know the technology and we know the uses we are what we are getting from the petroleum, and it's developed because we have a technology. It's a developed. Now making development in the petroleum should not damage the present environment. Suppose you are making development, that means you are extracting the petroleum and you are making use of petroleum for different other things that should not damage the present environment, and you made a development in the petroleum to make use of the petroleum for the every people, is not to satisfy the human need. We made development in that, so that development should not compromise with the future generation need. That means whatever the development which we made on that petroleum, that should be available in the future. That should not get over in this generation. That should be available in the future. That means we should have efficient use. We should have the equal use. That's about, we should have some careful use of resources by this development. It's about the sustainable economic development. That means the making development in the resources without damaging present environment, or should not damage the present environment, and without compromising the future generation need. So making development in the resources that should not damage present environment with and without compromising future generation need. It's a definition for this sustainable economic development. I hope you understand about this concept, the sustainable economic development. Write down this about the concept. Write down the definition. The sustainable economic development. Making development in resources that should not damage present environment and without compromising future generation. Means that should not compromise. This development should not compromise the future generation need. That's the meaning. We have to make a development in that resource that should not get over in this generation. We have to get that the same resources in the future generation also. Then that should not damage the environment. It's about sustainable economic development. Right? Is that over? Let me read it again. So making development in present, or sorry, let me, making development in resource that should not damage present environment and without compromising the future generation need. Is it over? Next, we'll go for next one, the concept. So for this, to have a sustainable economic development, the world leaders, they gathered in one place in 1992. In 1992, the head of every country, they gathered in Brazil. They gathered in Brazil to discuss about this sustainable economic development. It was a summit, it was a meeting. They called a meeting. There around 100 countries head, means 100 countries leaders, they gathered for taking decision about the sustainable economic development. So on that time, every people they knew, they got information that our planet is in danger. Every people they got information that we are running out of resources and we are making use of resources in a wrong way. So that may lead us to get in crisis in the future. So they thought of this all the things and they called for meeting. So they called for meeting in Brazil. So it has its own name. That means the city name is Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. So that summit means conference, like it's like meeting, the summit. So it's named with the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. So it's a meeting, the Rio de Earth Summit. Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. It's a world's first meeting to have a sustainable economic development regarding the resources. It's a Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. So this Earth Summit, it was held on in 1992 in Brazil. So this Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit took place in 1992 at Brazil. At Brazil it has took place. So there are around 100 countries head. They gathered. So around 100 head of 100 countries gathered. So they gathered in this meeting, head of 100 countries. This meeting or summit which took place in 1992 at Brazil. Are you getting at Brazil? So the head of 100 countries they gathered. So what was the main reason for calling this meeting or for conveying this meeting? What was main reason? The main reason was to address the urgent problem. The main reason, let me read the reason. What was main reason? To address in addressing the urgent problem of environmental protection and biological diversity. It was a main aim. It's the first meeting which took place in Brazil. It was the first meeting about the sustainable development. The first meeting which took place in the year of 1992 at Brazil. There around 100 countries had they present, means they gathered, they attended that summit or that meeting. The main reason for convening the meeting was to address the urgent problem of environmental protection. To address the urgent problem of environmental protection, to protect the environment and to get a biological diversity. To protect the biological diversity and to protect the environmental phenomena. So for these two factors they called a meeting. One is environmental protection and biological diversity. So these are the two important things which you need to remember. If I ask the question like the Rio de Janeiro summit which took place in the year of 1992, what was the main reason of having the summit? What was the main reason? The reasons is about in addressing the urgent problem. The urgent problem was like environmental protection. So we were badly needed to protect our environment because by our activities, by our greediness of our human beings, we were damaging the environment. So that was leading towards the crisis of availability of resources for future generation. For that reason, this meeting was convened. It was called to address the problem of environment protection and biological diversity. There, the head of 100 countries, they have signed the declaration. They signed the declaration of our declaration on global forest policy. So it's a declaration. So they have actually signed on this they are under head of 100 countries. They have signed for the declaration which they took. So declarations like a global forest policy, and they adopted the Agenda 21st. They adopted Agenda 21st and also the global forest policy. Global forest policy, and they adopted Agenda 21st. In this meeting, they adopted Agenda 21st, and all the members from 100 countries, they have signed the declaration which was on global forest policy. So on this global forest policy, they signed and they adopted 21st, Agenda 21st. In among these, all the factors, like the main reason was calling this meeting was to address the environmental protection and biological diversity which was needed at that time, and they set the global forest policy. In among these, Agenda 21st was the main thing, because Agenda 21st, it was mainly about having development in the sustainable resources in 21st century. Agenda, you know about the agenda, so 21st is about the 21st century. Now what we are in, it's about the 21st century. We are in the 21st century. So there, the 20th century, but in the end of the 20th century, they took a declaration. They adopted an agenda to have a sustainable development of resources for the next coming 100 years. So that's what we will be discussing. So it's about all the things like this meeting which is took place in the city called as Rio de Janeiro. The name of city is Rio de Janeiro, which is there in the Brazil. And this Earth Summit means the Earth meeting, which took place in the year of 1992 at Brazil. The main reason is about addressing the urgent problem of environmental protection. The main reason was addressing the urgent problem of environmental protection and biological diversity. So there, the head of 100 countries who were presented or who were participated there, who were gathered in that summit or meeting, they signed for the declaration which they took. It's about global forest policy. It's about declaration. They are accepted and they are signed, and they adopted the Agenda 21st. For that also they accepted and they are signed. So that's about this first meeting. Then we discuss about Agenda 21st. So what is Agenda 21st? So before we going to discuss about this, write on this concept. Write on this concept like it's it's article, you may say. It's one. It's not a topic actually. It's a thing which is happened. It's an event. You may say it's an event. The event or the program which is adopted or which is called, which is conveyed in concern with the sustainable economic development. Write on this. So is that over? So it's about the meeting or the event which took place in the year of 1992 in regard sustainable economic development. That's what we discussed. About the Agenda 21st, we will continue in the next classes. In the next class, we will continue the Agenda 21st because we have many things to discuss in that. Now it's going to complete what you call, we are going to end up our classes. We have only 3 or 2 minutes. So that reason, we will keep that concept to discuss in the next class. So now what we discuss is about sustainable economic development, and the last class we discussed about classification of resources. In the sustainable development, we discussed about this Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. It's a meet which took place in Brazil in the year of 1992. So I hope you people understood about this concept what we discussed, and we will continue in the next class. Thank you.